The DCKTI owned the Galactic Assembly Hall, stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, a monument to the power and prestige of the Sovereignty Coalition. Here, beneath vaulted ceilings that simulated the birth of stars, 200 species gathered to decide the fate of worlds. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood at the human podium, the smallest platform in the entire chamber, and felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. To his right, the Zaltharian delegate rose on 6 segmented legs, each limb as thick as an ancient earth oak. Their exoskeleton gleamed with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with their mood, currently displaying the purple hues of contempt. To his left, the Dravik representative floated in a containment field, their gaseous form swirling with colors that human eyes could barely perceive. Above them all, suspended in gravitational fields, dozens of other species watched with expressions ranging from pity to amusement. Marcus had rehearsed this moment for months. He took a breath and began his plea with just the right amount of desperation in his voice. The Terran Republic formally requests an amendment to the limitation accords. We seek permission to expand our defensive fleet from 500 vessels to 1,200. Recent intelligence suggests hostile forces may be targeting our system. The laughter started with the Zaltharians, a chittering sound like breaking glass. It spread through the assembly like a wave. Even the usually stoic Dravik pulsed with colors that their translators rendered as mocking humor. Ambassador Webb, the assembly speaker said, his 3 mouths moving in unsettling synchronization. This request has been denied 17 times in the past decade. The Terran Republic was granted full membership in the Coalition 30 years ago, under strict military limitations. These limitations exist because humanity's history demonstrates a disturbing tendency toward violence and self-destruction. Marcus lowered his head slightly, playing his part perfectly. He had practiced this humble posture in front of mirrors, perfecting the image of a weak species begging for scraps of security. We understand the Assembly's concerns, he said, his voice carrying just enough strain to sound authentic. However, the Nexari Collective has been expanding aggressively through the Perseus Arm. 12 species have been assimilated in the past 50 years. Our analysts believe Earth's system lies along their expansion vector. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Zaltharian delegate's bioluminescence flashed bright orange with amusement. Your analysts, the Zaltharian said, consist of 50 research vessels and a handful of listening posts scattered across your pathetic little system. Forgive us if we do not panic at human predictions. A Dravik council member spoke, their words translated from complex chemical signals into standard galactic. The Nexari Collective is indeed expanding, but they consume only species with valuable resources or strategic locations. Earth possesses neither. Your world is isolated, your technology primitive, your defensive capabilities laughable. You are not worth the energy expenditure of an assimilation campaign. Marcus allowed silence to stretch for 3 heartbeats. He looked around the chamber at the assembled powers of the galaxy. Species who commanded fleets of thousands, who shaped stars and moved planets, who viewed humanity as barely qualified to sit at the table of civilization. Then he bowed slightly and returned to his seat. The vote was unanimous. The request was denied. As Marcus gathered his data tablets, the Zaltharian delegate approached him, their massive form casting a shadow that engulfed the human completely. Do not take it personally, Ambassador Webb, they said, their translator rendering their chittering speech into something resembling sympathy. The galaxy is simply being realistic. Your species barely survived first contact with the Vrek pirates 2 centuries ago. You lost half your colonies before the Coalition intervened. We remember your desperate broadcasts, your pleas for mercy. Some species are simply not meant for the harsh realities of galactic conflict. Marcus looked up at the towering alien and allowed a small, tired smile to cross his face. Perhaps you're right, he said quietly. Perhaps we're just not cut out for this universe. The Zalfarians' bioluminescence shifted to a satisfied green, and they moved away, confident in their assessment of human weakness. What none of them saw was the micro-expression that crossed Marcus Webb's face as he turned away. A flash of something that looked very much like satisfaction. The performance had been perfect. The galaxy still believed the lie. 3 billion kilometers from Earth, beyond Neptune's orbit, in the vast darkness of the Kuiper Belt, the truth waited in absolute silence. Here, among chunks of primordial ice and rock that had drifted unchanged since the solar system's birth, humanity had built something magnificent and terrible. Shadow Station. Prime appeared on all official registries as mining installation K447, a small operation extracting water and rare isotopes from ancient comets. Its energy signature matched its stated purpose exactly. Its crew manifest listed 42 civilian workers rotating on 6-month shifts. Its communication traffic was mundane and predictable. Every inspection by Coalition observers found exactly what they expected to find. None of them ever saw what lay beneath. Captain Victoria Cross walked through Shadow Station's public levels, past the dusty mining equipment that hadn't been used in 5 years, past the living quarters that housed actors playing the roles of miners. She descended through an airlock, hidden behind a false panel, dropped down a shaft that plunged 3 kilometers into what scans would show as solid ice, and emerged into something that would give the Galactic Assembly nightmares. The hangar bay stretched for 50 kilometers in every direction. The ice above had been hollowed out using precision thermal excavation, creating a cavern that could swallow small moons. The entire structure was lined with quantum-dampening materials that absorbed every form of energy that touched it. To the outside universe, this place was invisible. To Captain Cross, it was home. The warship Phoenix Rising dominated the center of the hangar. Its hull was crafted from metamaterials that could shift between phases of matter, rendering it nearly undetectable when dormant. At 3 kilometers in length, it dwarfed anything humanity had officially admitted to building. Its main weapon system, a gravimetric disruptor cannon, could tear apart the molecular bonds of matter itself. Around it, arranged in perfect geometric patterns, hung 200 smaller vessels, destroyers, frigates, interceptors, each one a masterpiece of human engineering that the galaxy had never seen. Victoria Cross had commanded this installation for 8 years. She had never once fired the weapons in anger. She had never once revealed their existence to anyone outside the chain of command. She had spent nearly a decade in this frozen darkness, waiting for a moment that might never come. Until today. Status report. She said to her executive officer, Commander James Torres, "All systems operational, Captain." Torres replied, his voice carrying the barely contained excitement that everyone on the station felt. "Reactors at standby. Weapon systems at Ready 5. Crew at battle stations. We can achieve full combat capability in 90 seconds. Victoria nodded, her eyes scanning the tactical displays that surrounded her command chair. Phoenix Rising was just one of 16 super dreadnoughts hidden throughout the Sol system. Each commanded a battle group of 200 vessels. The mathematics was simple and devastating. 8,000 warships, built in absolute secrecy over 150 years, using resources diverted through false reporting and creative accounting. 8,000 ships that officially didn't exist. The galaxy thought humanity had 500 defensive vessels. They were wrong by a factor of 16. The Terran Limitation Accords had been humanity's greatest gift and greatest camouflage. While the galaxy watched those 500 ships with careful attention, while Coalition inspectors verified their weapons and capabilities, while the Assembly congratulated themselves on keeping humanity safely contained, humans had been building something else entirely in the darkness between worlds. It had begun after the First Contact War, after the Vrek pirates had nearly exterminated humanity, after the Coalition had grudgingly intervened and saved what was left. The human leaders who survived that nightmare had made a simple promise. Never again. Never again would humanity be caught unprepared. Never again would they trust their survival to the mercy of others. Never again would they allow themselves to appear strong enough to be threatening, but too weak to defend themselves. So they had created the Phoenix Initiative. The official defense fleet would remain visible, limited, and carefully monitored. But in secret, in the dark places where no one looked, humanity would build their real military. They would smile and bow and play the role of grateful junior members of the Galactic Coalition. And all the while, they would prepare for the day when someone decided that weak, primitive humanity wasn't worth protecting anymore. That day had finally arrived. On the bridge of the Nexari collective ship Unity of Purpose, Warmind designate Executor Prime processed data streams from 10,000 sources simultaneously. The Nexari were not biological beings, not anymore. They had begun as an organic species millions of years ago, but had long since transcended the limitations of flesh. Now they existed as distributed consciousness spread across quantum-entangled processors, millions of individual minds networked into perfect unity. They did not conquer for resources or territory. They conquered to grow. Each species they assimilated added new perspectives, new ways of thinking, new processing power to the collective. They were not evil. They were simply following their evolutionary imperative to expand and incorporate. Executor Prime had been analyzing the species called humanity for 3 standard cycles. The data was contradictory. Human colony ships registered certain mass signatures, but arrived at destinations with different configurations. Human trade vessels took routes that made no economic sense. Encrypted transmissions burst between human installations using bandwidth far beyond civilian requirements. Executor Prime had flagged these anomalies to the Nexari High Collective. The response had been dismissive. Humans were primitive. Their technology was centuries behind Coalition standards. Their defensive fleet numbered only 500 vessels, most of them outdated and poorly maintained. The Coalition had deemed them so non-threatening that they barely monitored human space anymore. The High Collective had analyzed the strategic value of the Sol system. 8 planets. A stable star. A species with reasonable processing potential once assimilated. The decision was unanimous. Earth would be incorporated into the Nexari Collective. Resistance was neither expected nor relevant. If humanity's 500 ships chose to fight, they would be disabled and their crews assimilated. If they chose surrender, the assimilation would proceed peacefully. 6,000 autonomous warships were dispatched, the largest force the Nexari had assembled in a century. Not because humans were dangerous, but because the operation was being used as a training exercise for newly created Warmind constructs. Executor Prime reviewed the data one final time before the fleet made the jump to human space. The anomalies in human behavior still troubled its processing cores, but orders were absolute. The collective had decided. In 48 hours, humanity would join the Nexari network, and all questions would be answered when human minds were absorbed into the whole. What Executor Prime did not know, could not know, was that those anomalies it had detected were intentional. They were breadcrumbs left by human intelligence operatives who had been monitoring the Nexari for decades. They were designed to be just visible enough that a truly analytical mind might notice them, but subtle enough that they could be dismissed as the inefficiency of a primitive species. Humanity had wanted the Nexari to come, not because humans welcomed assimilation, but because the Phoenix Initiative had been built specifically for this moment. For 150 years, humanity had prepared for the day when someone would finally test whether the species that seemed so weak was really as helpless as they appeared. That day was here, and the galaxy was about to learn a truth that would echo across every star system in known space. Humanity had spent 2 centuries carefully cultivating an image of weakness. But behind that facade, in the dark places where no one looked, they had become something else entirely. They had become predators waiting patiently for their moment to strike dot in the command bunker beneath the rocky mountains of Earth. Admiral Kenji Tanaka watched holographic displays that showed the entire solar system. Each display tracked different elements of humanity's hidden strength. Jupiter's moons concealed carrier groups disguised as research stations. The asteroid belt held battle platforms inside hollowed-out planetoids. Saturn's rings hid an entire squadron among the ice particles. Venus's crushing atmosphere concealed a weapons development facility that had been testing exotic technologies for decades. Admiral, his communications officer said, Nexaray fleet detected at the heliopause. 6,000 vessels in standard invasion formation. They will reach Earth orbit in 36 hours. Finally, Admiral Tanaka said quietly. He had commanded the Phoenix Initiative for 12 years, ever since the previous admiral had retired. 12 years of drills and simulations. 12 years of maintenance and readiness checks. 12 years of keeping the greatest secret in human history. And now, finally, the moment had arrived. He opened a communication channel that connected every hidden installation, every concealed shipyard, every dark facility across the solar system. His voice was steady and certain. This is Defense Command Actual. Authorization code Phoenix Rising 77 Bravo. Protocol revelation is now active. All elements transition to combat status. Prepare to reveal what we truly are. Across the solar system, in dozens of hidden locations, thousands of ships began their activation sequences. Reactors that had been in standby for years powered up to full capacity. Weapons systems that had never been fired outside simulations charged and calibrated. Crews who had trained their entire lives for this moment moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. The Nexari were coming, confident in their overwhelming numbers and superior technology. They expected to find 500 aging human ships and an easy assimilation. Instead, they were about to encounter something that would fundamentally change their understanding of humanity and send shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy. They were about to discover what happens when prey animals decide to stop running and start hunting. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon was not any technology or tactic. It was patience. The patience to appear weak while growing strong. The patience to be underestimated for generations. The patience to wait for exactly the right moment to show the galaxy who they really were. That moment was now. The deception was ending. The revelation was beginning. And nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Asterisk, a Derivialation, the Nexari invasion. Fleet materialized at the edge of the Sol system in a formation that had conquered 12 civilizations. 6,000 warships arranged in concentric spheres, each layer supporting the others. Each vessel connected through quantum-entangled communication that allowed them to operate as a single entity. They emerged from hyperspace with precision that only machine intelligence could achieve. Their hulls reflecting the distant light of Earth's sun. On the bridge of unity of purpose, Executor Prime processed data from millions of sensors. The system before them was exactly as predicted. 8 planets orbiting a yellow dwarf star. Primitive infrastructure scattered across the inner worlds. Communication traffic that suggested a civilization barely beginning to explore their own stellar backyard. And there, approaching from the direction of Mars, the registered Earth Defense Fleet. 500 ships, just as the intelligence reports had indicated. Broadcast standard assimilation protocols, Executor Prime commanded. The message transmitted across all frequencies, in every known language, impossible to ignore. Species designation human. You have been selected for incorporation into the Nexari Collective. All biological entities will be uploaded to the network. All material resources will be integrated into collective infrastructure. Resistance is inefficient and will result in unnecessary damage to both processing hardware and biological substrates. You have 1 standard hour to power down all defensive systems and prepare for peaceful assimilation. On Earth, in the command bunker, Admiral Tanaka listened to the Nexari ultimatum with an expression that hadn't changed in hours. Around him, dozens of officers monitored displays showing the disposition of both fleets. The visible fleet, humanity's 500 official warships, was moving into a defensive formation around Earth. On paper, they were hopelessly outmatched. In reality, they were bait. Ambassador Webb appeared on the communication screen from his ship returning from the Galactic Assembly. Admiral, the Coalition is monitoring the situation. They've opened a channel offering to mediate a peaceful surrender. They're recommending we accept the Nexari terms to avoid unnecessary loss of life. Tanaka allowed himself a small smile. Decline their offer. Tell them Earth will handle this internally. But Admiral, Webb said, maintaining his role perfectly, they're offering refugee status for human survivors. They're willing to resettle our population on Coalition worlds. Tell them, Tanaka said, his voice hard as steel, that humanity has a different plan. Victoria Cross stood on the bridge of Phoenix Rising, watching her tactical displays with the focused intensity of a predator. Around her, her crew of 200 worked in perfect synchronization, the product of years of training that the outside galaxy never knew existed. She wore the uniform of the Terran Strategic Space Command, an organization that officially didn't exist, commanding a ship that no registry acknowledged, preparing to fight a battle that would rewrite galactic history. Admiral Tanaka issued his final orders. Disable Nexari hyperspace capability, but allow them to use conventional drives. Let them limp back to their collective at sublight speed. It will take them decades to reach home. Decades to carry the message of what happened here. The galaxy needs to understand what Earth has become. The human fleet formed a corridor, weapons still hot, still tracking the surviving Nexari ships. Executor Prime, processing from the crippled bridge of unity of purpose, understood the message clearly. Humanity was allowing them to survive not out of mercy, but to serve as witnesses. To tell the collective what they had found in human space, the Nexari remnants began their slow retreat from Sol System. Behind them, the human fleet held position, a wall of metal and firepower that had appeared from nowhere and defeated what should have been an overwhelming invasion force. On Earth, people watched the skies and began to understand that their species was not what they had believed, that for generations their leaders had been preparing for this exact moment, that humanity had been playing a role, waiting for the perfect time to reveal the truth. In the Galactic Assembly, debate erupted. Some called for sanctions against humanity for violating the spirit of the Limitation Accords. Others argued that humans had technically followed the letter of the treaty. Still others simply stared at the displays, showing 8,000 human warships, and recalculated every assumption they had ever made about Earth. The Zeltharian delegate approached Ambassador Webb's hologram. How? They demanded, their bioluminescence flashing angry red. How did you hide this from us? How did we miss 8,000 ships? Webb smiled, and for the first time, the galaxy saw the expression not as weak or pleading, but as something far more dangerous. You missed them because you assumed you already knew everything about us. You assumed that a species that begged for protection 2 centuries ago would always be weak. You assumed that because we appeared helpless, we actually were helpless. Your arrogance made you blind. We were building in the darkness, and you never thought to look. Admiral Tanaka stood in the command bunker, surrounded by officers who had just won the most important battle in human history. The display still showed their fleet, no longer hidden, spread across the solar system like a protective barrier. For 150 years, they had kept the secret. For 150 years, they had prepared. Now the galaxy knew. Now humanity had stepped into the light. The sacrifice had been enormous. Entire generations of engineers, soldiers, and leaders had lived their lives in secret, building ships they hoped would never need to fight, preparing for wars they prayed would never come. They had watched the galaxy ignore humanity, mock humanity, dismiss humanity as irrelevant. And they had said nothing, because the plan required patience, required the discipline to be underestimated. Victoria Cross guided Phoenix, rising through the debris field that had once been a Nexari fleet. Her ship had survived without a scratch. Her crew had performed flawlessly. Around her, 7,999 other human warships held position, their commanders waiting for the next order. The Phoenix Initiative was no longer a secret. It was now simply reality. The reality that Earth was protected not by treaties or coalition goodwill, but by the determination of a species that had learned the harshest lesson any civilization could learn. In this galaxy, survival belonged to the strong, the prepared, and the patient. News of the Battle of Sol spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by faster-than-light communication relays that connected every civilized system. Within days, every species knew what had happened. The Nexari Collective, which had assimilated 12 civilizations, had been defeated by a species they had considered primitive. The humans, who had seemed so weak, so desperate, so unthreatening, had revealed a military capability that rivaled the greatest powers in known space. Diplomatic relationships shifted overnight. Species that had ignored humanity's requests for trade agreements suddenly sent delegations to Earth. Military powers that had dismissed human technology requested information exchanges. The Sovereignty Coalition, which had kept humanity under restrictive treaties for 3 decades, now debated whether those treaties had ever been remotely enforceable. In the solar system, construction facilities that had operated in secret for generations were moving into the light. Shipyards in the Kuiper Belt, on asteroids, in Saturn's rings, all revealed themselves and continued their work, but now openly. The deception was over. The truth was known. Humanity had spent 2 centuries cultivating an image of weakness. They had played the role perfectly, appearing helpless while growing strong. They had hoped for peace, prepared for war, and when war came, they were ready. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The species that had barely survived first contact had become something else entirely. They had become a power that could not be threatened, could not be underestimated, could not be dismissed, and in the darkness between stars, in the quiet places where humanity had built its hidden strength, new ships were already under construction, because the lesson that humans had learned was not just about preparation. It was about eternal vigilance. The Phoenix Initiative had revealed itself, but humanity's planning continued. They would never again trust their survival to the mercy of others. They would never again allow themselves to be vulnerable. The galaxy had changed forever. Earth's hidden fleet had emerged, and nothing would ever be the same again. The species that the galaxy had pitied now stood among the powers of known space. The civilization that had begged for protection now needed no one's permission to defend itself. Humanity had shown the galaxy what patience, determination, and preparation could achieve, and somewhere in the darkness, planning for threats that might not arrive for generations, humanity continued to build, because they had learned the ultimate truth of galactic survival. Hope for peace, prepare for war, and never, ever let anyone know your true strength until the moment you need to use it. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. The knowledge that appearance and reality were not always the same, that weakness could be an illusion, that the species you dismissed today might be the power you feared tomorrow. The hidden fleet was hidden no more. And the galaxy would never forget the day Earth revealed what humanity truly was. The End. Asterisk.